people are yearning for meaning in their lives. And I think they have a sense that in order to find meaning, they have to find authenticity, reality, and connection and relationship. And so they're yearning for community so that they can get these things. Now, community does not just mean any geographical aggregate of people. Community has to do with communication. And so what they are yearning for is more authentic and meaningful communication. There was a monastery which had fallen upon hard times. Once a very great order, it suffered a loss of spirit, so that there were only 5 monks left, all over the age of 70. Clearly it was a dying order. In the deep woods surrounding the monastery, there was an old shack to which a rabbi from a nearby town occasionally used to come for hermitage. Through their many years of prayer and contemplation, the old monks had become a bit psychic, so they could always sense when the rabbi was in his hermitage. "The rabbi's in the woods, the rabbi's in the woods again," they would whisper to each other. Agonizing over the imminent death of his beloved monastery, it occurred to the abbot at one such time to visit the rabbi and ask if by some chance he could offer any advice that might save the dying order. The rabbi welcomed the abbot at his shack, but when the abbot explained the purpose of his visit, the rabbi could only commiserate with him. "I know how it is," he exclaimed. "The spirit has gone out of the people. It is the same in my town. Almost no one comes to the synagogue anymore." So the old abbot and the old rabbi wept together. Then they read parts of the Torah and quietly spoke of deep things. The time came when the abbot had to leave. "It has been a wonderful thing that we should meet after all these years," the abbot said. "But I have still failed in my purpose for coming here. Is there nothing you can tell me? No piece of advice you can give me that would help me save my dying order?" "No, I am sorry," the rabbi responded. "I have no advice. The only thing I can tell you is that the Messiah is one of you." When the abbot returned, his fellow monks crowded around him. "Well, what did the rabbi say?" "He couldn't help," the abbot answered. "We just wept and read the Torah together. The only thing he did say, just as I was leaving, it was something cryptic, was that the Messiah is one of us." In the days and weeks and months that followed, the old monks pondered this and wondered whether there was any possible significance to the rabbi's parting words. "The Messiah is one of us?" Could he possibly have meant one of us monks here at the monastery? If that's the case, which one? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? Yes, if he meant anyone, he probably meant Father Abbot. He's been our leader for more than a generation. But then he might have meant Brother Thomas. Certainly Brother Thomas is a holy man. Everyone knows that Thomas is a man of light. Certainly he couldn't have meant Brother Elred. Elred gets crotchety. But come to think of it, Elred is virtually always right. Maybe the rabbi did mean Brother Elred. But surely not Brother Philip. He's so passive, but then Philip is always there when you need him. He just mysteriously appears at your side. Maybe Philip is the Messiah. Of course, the rabbi didn't mean me. I'm just an ordinary person. Yet supposing he did, suppose I am the Messiah. Oh God, not me. I couldn't be that much for you, could I? As they contemplated in this manner, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect. On the off chance that one among them might be the Messiah, And on the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary respect. Because the forest in which it was located was so beautiful, it so happened that people still occasionally came to visit the monastery, to picnic on its lawn, to wander along some of its paths, even now and then to go into the chapel to meditate. As they did, they sensed this aura of extraordinary respect that now began to surround the 5 old monks and seemed to permeate the atmosphere of the place. There was something compelling about it. Hardly knowing why, they began to come back to the monastery more frequently, to picnic, to play, to pray. They began to bring their friends. Then it happened that some of the younger men who came started to talk more and more with the old monks. After a while, one asked if he could join them. Then another, and another. So within a few years, the monastery had once again become a thriving order, and, thanks to the rabbi's gift, a vibrant center of light and spirituality in the realm.
To bring the spirit of extraordinary respect into the everyday realm, Dr. Peck, with his wife Lily and 9 others, established the Foundation for Community Encouragement, FCE. Carlisle Motors enlisted FCE to help them bring the principles of community into the workplace.
In the past, what we've done with groups or organizations is 2 or 3 day community building workshops. And this is going to be a whole year of looking at ways that we can help Carlisle become community with each other.
The most extraordinary thing about Carlisle Motors is that they were an organization that was not in crisis. They were a business that were doing extremely well, and they just decided they wanted to do it better. That their leaders had come and seen this community building and thought that they could do their business even better. And it wasn't that they were doing it badly. It wasn't that they were facing a crisis. And so their executives were unusually self-motivated people in this regard, that they realized it was critical to communicate well, even though they didn't have a crisis.
We measure our what we call our employee satisfaction index through surveys of our associates, and while relatively speaking, as companies go, we rank pretty good, there's still, for me anyway, a gnawing sense that we could have a lot more. The trust factor among just individuals, much less management versus employees and that sort of thing. I think we've got a long way to go there. And speaking from a personal point of view, a lot of relationships that have yet to be developed and explored.
What I predict is going to happen is we're going to go in a room and try to get to know each other a little bit better and try to cut through the bull and get real with each other and talk about what we're really feeling and say what we think instead of what we think people want to hear.
Yeah, I think I do have a little anxiety, a little nervous, a little what to expect.
Being a service technician, I'm more used to working with metal pieces than humans. All right, and you know, this type of encounter is unusual to me.
I do have anxiety for the fact that we have a lot of high-power, high-performance people. And in the automobile industry, there are a lot of ego-driven people. And in fact, that's what makes us the automobile industry. Some of the things that make us singularly successful is that we do have people that are very ego-driven. Now, my anxiety arises that when you get all these ego-driven people in a room, there's going to be conflict. And I think some of the conflict is going to be I think it's going to be a problem for some people who do not like conflict, which in this group probably will be far and few between, but I do think it'll be somewhat of a problem.
It's an anticipation of, okay, well, there's going to be 50 of us that work together, and boy, you know, is this going to help? Is it going to hurt? What could the outcome be? And I guess it's, we'll find out in 3 days.
together a group of people who are strangers to build community, the first thing that happens is that they pretend that they already are a community. And so the first stage of the process is what we call pseudo-community. They pretend that they already are a community. The essence of the pretense is that we are all the same. That we all have pretty much the same dislike of Ronald Reagan and all have pretty much the same belief in Jesus Christ. We're all pretty much the same. And this pretense is maintained through manners, which are unwritten rules that everybody knows, that everybody brings with them to the workshop. Rules like you should do your very best to not say anything that might offend, antagonize, alienate, or upset anybody else. And if anybody else says something that offends, antagonizes, alienates, or upsets you, you should pretend that absolutely nothing has happened and it hasn't bothered you in the least. And if any disagreement starts to surface, you should immediately change the subject. Rules that any good hostess knows, right?
Basically, there's really only a couple things that actually motivates this dealership, and that's customer satisfaction and taking care of its employees. And other than that, you know, you're going to get normal attrition through people retiring and things. But generally, like I said, this is not really a roller coaster here.
I like the people. We have lots of fun. Definitely lots of fun. I mean, when we have a temporary come in and work for a while, she says, boy, you girls really have fun here.
The people in the parts department that I supervise or work with, we've been together for about 3 years, and we get along real well. And we have very little problems, but when they do, personal or business-like, we work them out together and we talk. I think we do a real good job together. We get along good.
Our task as leaders in leading these community building workshops is to get people out of pseudo-community just as quickly as we can. There are several techniques that we have for speeding this up. Sometimes groups will naturally go out into it, but what they're based upon is getting the differences between people to surface. One of the things that happens in pseudo-community is that people tend to speak in generalizations. And they say, we do this, and people do that, and one feels that way. And we will say, let's say if I'm the leader of one of these workshops, and Mary says, an hour into the workshop or so, Mary says, oh, divorce is a dreadful thing. I'll say, Mary, I hope you don't mind me using you as an example, but we find that we get to community quicker if we speak personally. If we speak personally, use what we call I-my statements. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind rephrasing that to say that my divorce was a dreadful thing for me. Mary will say, okay, Scotty, if that's the way you want me to put it, okay, my divorce was a dreadful thing for me. Whereupon Martha will say, well, Mary, I'm glad you put it that way because my divorce was the most glorious thing that ever happened in my life. Incidentally, think for a moment about what Martha might be feeling like when Mary is saying, oh, divorce is a dreadful thing, and everybody is nodding their head, and she's not allowed to disagree or whatnot, and nobody's speaking personally. What do you think she's feeling? Isolated, alone, different, outside? Well, what happens when individual differences are allowed to surface, or in this case even encouraged? What happens as soon as they surface is that the group immediately degenerates into chaos, which is the second stage of the community building process. First stage, pseudo-community. Second stage, chaos. Now, I said degenerates into chaos. That is really the wrong word. It often feels like degeneration, but a better word would be evolve. Evolves into chaos, because even though it is not nearly as pleasant as pseudo-community, nonetheless it is one step closer to reality. Now, just as the underlying premise of pseudo-community is that there are no differences, the underlying premise of this stage we call chaos is to try and obliterate the differences now that they have surfaced, and to obliterate them mostly by healing and converting. And it goes kind of like this, that somebody would say, well, the reason I came to this workshop was that I had this little problem. I thought I might find an answer to it this weekend. Nothing that reveals too much about him, but at least he's got the courage, vulnerability to say he's got a problem. And a second person trying to heal him or fix him will say, I had that problem once and I did this and it took care of it. And the first person will say, well, I tried that and it didn't take care of it. And the third person will say, well, I acknowledge Jesus to be my Lord and Savior, and that took care of that problem and every other problem in my life. And the first person will say, well, golly gee, I'm sorry, but that Jesus, Lord and Savior bit just doesn't really grab me. It's not where I'm at the moment. And the fourth person will say, no, as a matter of fact, it makes me want to puke. And the fifth person will say, but it's true. And so they're off. And there is this thing that we psychotherapists call resistance, and people don't like to be healed or converted very much, and so they resist. So the healers try harder to heal them, and the converters try harder to convert them, until finally their victims get their backs up against the wall and turn around and start trying to heal the healers and convert the converters, and it is absolutely glorious chaos.
At the present time, we're very much departmentalized or territorial. For example, we have a used car manager, a new car sales manager, service director, parts manager. We all tend to watch out for our own turf.
The way I handle conflicts and tension now probably is a pretty direct, I'll go right to the person and say, hey, this is what's happening. Maybe I don't need to go, hey, this is what's happening quite as abruptly as I do, and maybe I can learn how to do that a little bit better. I don't hold much in, which is good, but I probably sometimes hold the wrong things in.
At Lincoln Mercury, Ford, and Acura, you'll find a strong team spirit among each group, but if one of the group, if Acura has to go to Ford for something, or Ford has to go to Lincoln Mercury for something, you don't find that. You find sometimes even an adversarial relationship.
I'd be a liar if I said morale was high all the time. We have peaks and valleys. Right now, I think maybe morale could improve a little bit.
I'm hoping that the rest of the departments will be able to see myself and the people that work for me and with me as human beings, that we do have feelings, we do have strong commitments, and that we're not always the bad guys.
For me, community is not where we all stand with our arms around each other singing and everything is wonderful. Community is where we connect in a very, very deep way. And I don't know how to do that without moving through some struggles, with some pain, some difficulties, because sharing in a real way is a difficult process. When we move through that, there is a sense of real connection with people and a group of people where I can be who I am, and I know that's okay. And I can disagree and I can be in conflict, but there is that sense of we are one and we are a community.
And then I ask them to be quiet and reflective and reflect on where we're going wrong, because we're obviously doing something very wrong. And if you're into prayer, I'd like you to pray for us. But if you're not in prayer, that's okay, but just think about where we're going wrong. And then when the group reconvenes, what will begin to happen by the dint of God's grace and some strong leadership is that the group will begin to move out of chaos into emptiness. This is the third stage of community building. And it is the hard part. It is the hard part. And incidentally, stages 1 and 2 are natural. They are natural stages. People go through them naturally. Groups naturally start as pseudo-communities, and if differences start to emerge, they naturally go into chaos. Whereupon, if the chaos goes on long enough, they either self-destruct or they will retreat back into ever stronger pseudo-community. So these stages are natural, but this stage of emptiness is unnatural. And people are absolutely terrified of it, even though mystics throughout the ages have spoken of the virtues of emptiness. People are terrified of it, and they're sitting there saying, my God, you know, if we're not here to heal each other and convert each other, what are we here for? And who's going to speak next about what? And maybe it'll be me, and how should I know? Ah! And there are various strategies that they use to flee from emptiness. The most common is to set up organizations and develop committees and subcommittees with subcommittee chairmen to debate the meaning of emptiness or arrive at a true definition of community. But as we tell them that there are only two ways out of chaos, one is into organization, which is never in itself community, and the only other way is into and through emptiness. And so it is then that the people in the group, and it's amazing how they do this, is that they will begin to empty themselves of whatever it is that stands between them and community. Many of these things that people need to empty themselves of are human universals. Expectations that they came to the workshop with, or that you came to this day with. And often people are so busy trying to make the experience conform to their expectations of what they thought it would be that they're not able to have the experience at all, or learn anything new. And this is just human. If I go to a workshop, I've been to 200 now, if I go to my 201st, I can tell you in the first 10 minutes there's somebody that I will have decided is a total loser, and I wish to hell they'd never come, and then a day later realize that that person is a saint. We need to empty ourselves of our needs to heal and fix. Same thing with the attempts to convert. Let's say that Jim isn't here. Jim's got a different theology from mine, which is highly likely. Now, my theology is very fundamental to me. It's the foundation for my values and much of my thinking. And for Jim to have a different theology from mine, it calls my foundations into question, makes them feel shaky, and that's uncomfortable. And it'd be just so much more comfortable for me if I could convert you to my theology. And it would also make me your savior, and that would make me feel pretty good, too. So we need to empty ourselves of our needs to heal, convert, fix people. How many of you, for instance, have been so busy preparing your reply to what somebody's saying that you haven't been able to hear what she's saying? Yeah, these universals. Another one, real bugaboo for us community building leaders, because we're supposed to make this stuff succeed and whatnot, is we need to empty ourselves of the need to control, make it go by formula. How many of you here also from time to time might need to empty yourself of a certain need to control? So these are universals, right? Others are particularly personal, and so somebody may come back after a break and say, I realized during the break what I have to empty myself of is my anger at my mother. I am so damn angry at her that I haven't been able to hear anything that's been going on for the last day here. As a matter of fact, I haven't been able to enjoy anything for the last 3 weeks. Now, this business of emptiness, it is amazing that people can do it. And one of the most horrible experiences for leaders is sitting around helplessly watching groups go through their death throes without really being able to do anything. But die they do. And just as individuals sometimes have long and protracted deaths and sometimes have sudden death, so it is in this business of community. Sometimes the entrance into the fourth stage is sudden. Sometimes it is very gradual. But die they do. And all of a sudden, what will happen after a group has been empty long enough, struggled with emptiness long enough, is that someone will start talking at a far more deep and authentic, touching level than anybody has spoken before. And then there will be silence. And then after some silence, a second person will start talking about himself at that same deep, authentic level as the first person. Maybe without even making any reference to the first person, but the feeling you have is not that the first person has been ignored, but that the second person has gone and laid himself up on the altar alongside the first. And then a third person will start talking about herself with that same deep, authentic way, or else make some comment that is particularly pithy and more concise and relevant than anything that has yet been said. And in short order, a great deal of grief and brokenness will be expressed, and a great deal of joy and laughter and community will have been born, and a great deal of converting and healing will start to occur once people have learned to stop trying to heal and convert.
You had mentioned something that's, I guess, been bothering me ever since you've mentioned it. You were explaining or defining your role in the company, and in doing so, what I had heard was that you were almost asking approval, that you felt that you were spending more time with your children and your wife, and you have less responsibility for the day-to-day activities or whatever, and it almost sounded like you're asking for us to say that, well, that's okay. And I guess that's been going through my mind ever since you've said that, because it seems so odd to me, because being the dealer principal, you know, it would appear to me that would be your right.
I think that, you know, one of the reasons I was asking for that permission or just letting people know, you know, if you don't see me around, that might be where I am, is it's been a competitive place. Carlisle Motors is made up of a lot of high-performance people, and I guess I'm a competitive person too, and I always feel the responsibility to carry my own weight. I don't want to just be somebody that sits there and makes the money from everybody's labors. You know, I feel a responsibility to earn my keep too, and I'm insecure about it a lot, and I've had a lot of paranoid feelings, and that I, you know, being the third generation in this business, that I've been, you know, handed everything on a silver spoon, and that I'm not worthy of it or whatever. And conscious of all the feelings of how many businesses don't make it into the third or fourth generation, because, you know, my father is a very high-performance person and a very special person himself, and it's very hard to live up to that standard that my grandfather and my father have set. And it puts a lot of pressure on you, and sometimes it gets to you, and you start feeling, you know, like I said, like you're not worthy to be in the position that you're in. And I have tried this summer, since my kids have been out of school, to work on my family relationships, spend time with my son and my daughter. My son, Jeffrey, is 8 years old, and he is just absolutely hungry for my attention. And it's cool because I can give it to him. And he and I have a lot in common, and it's, you know, he and I are becoming buddies, and that feels really good. But I am conscious of, you know, the fact that, you know, maybe I'll take my kids to swim practice in the morning and come in late, or some days I don't come in at all, or some days I come in dressed casually instead of in a suit and whatever. And with my perception of the environment at work, I see this, you know, standard up there that Carlisle people are supposed to be and supposed to look like and supposed to act like. And I know a lot of you and people that are back at work are putting in, you know, it seems like 80-hour weeks. And I probably, being one of the owners, profit more than anybody else. And I guess it, it creates guilt, is this money that I earned, or am I just, happen to be in the right place at the right time? But anyway, it feels good to talk about it and get it out, and then maybe I can get on with something more important.
What you've just said, Steve, is what, in my estimation, community is all about, developing relationships. And, you've seized the opportunity, and I think that it's just flowing out of, our community building here, that you're seizing the opportunity to develop relationships with your kids, And I think we all yearn, to do that. And deep down within me, I keep saying it, and, I'm a provider, but I keep saying to myself, what price am I willing to pay, to really develop a real bond, with my kids, and I think that you're moving out, to bond with them, and I still don't know what price I'm willing to pay to really bond. I keep bringing it up, and I don't think that I paid the dues, if I can use that word, to develop the relationships that I really would like to do, with my kids.
And I would say to you, Steve, that's good what you're doing, because I have 4 grown children, and I don't have a relationship with any of them. Because my father was a provider, and I was a provider, and I didn't build a relationship with them. I have always been a workaholic, and I guess I've chosen that as my profession, because I've spent 50, 60, 80 hours a week at work since I was 20, 21 years old, and never developed a relationship with my children. So I think that's really neat that you're doing that.
Dick said something that struck a heavy chord in my heart, and it related to what Steve had said earlier about his feeling of guilt. And when Dick made the comment about, I've heard him say it before, about the relationship with the children, it really never hit home until hearing it along with what Steve said about the guilt feeling. I've always had a lot of guilt because this might sound crazy. I have a wonderful relationship with my 3 sons. One's graduated college, 2 of them are in college. They're great at everything they do, they're good kids, but I've always felt guilty that I put so much time into them, and the career everyone always expected more of me than where I'm at my age, and I've always felt like I was a failure there. But hearing what, it's difficult. I guess I'm not a failure.
The 2 things that impressed me the most of that segment about Carlisle Motors was the quietness, the periods of short but significant silence where people were digesting what had been said before jumping in with something else. And the other was the respect that was palpable they had for each other in that room.
When we go through this process and you hear some of the things of your peers or the people you work with say certain things, they have a tendency to move something in you, and you don't even know what's going to happen because you don't know what's going to be said. So when people talk about children or parents or relationships, all of a sudden you start thinking about, you focus on yours. So you move your focus off of dollars and cents and financial statements to what's probably a little bit more important, and that's interrelationships. And typically you're not conditioned, I'm not conditioned anyway, to focus on that when I wake up in the morning. I'm robotic. I get dressed, I go to work. And in this process, you slow down, you hear people talk about the relationships they wish they had with their children. And having young children, when I hear that, I go, well, see, it's not too late for me. You know, I need to spend more time and do this because I hear this peer over here, or this associate who I respect, say something like that, you know, and I really respect him for all of his accomplishments, but he really wished he had done something different years ago. So I take that more into my life and try to find a way not to put myself in that position.
It definitely has changed the climate or cemented the fact that, you know, politically in our company, it's definitely not cool to appear to be selfish or to try to get your company, your department at Carlisle to be successful at anybody else's expense. That's definitely out. If it ever was in, it's definitely out now. And if people are trying to look good to top management, the way you do that now is through teamwork and helping other departments, other dealerships, and that's great.
The most important thing that I've learned is to be able to listen with some objectivity and compassion, and to try and listen in a way where I'm not being judgmental.
How I respond, I think, too, is different, too. With problems that the other guys come to me with, or if I have a problem, I feel like I can go to someone else now without being as in fear of them. So I think my biggest thing professionally is it's helped me to realize that the people that I work with are just like me. They have feelings and they have sensitivities.
You can't help but realize that you know, everybody operates with their own personal and professional motivations.
In December, before we started, my selfish and personal motivation was to take off my masks and to be able to be me. And I realize now that what I wanted to be was one of the guys. You know, I had this need to belong and to just be like everybody else. And what I realized through the community building is that, in fact, what I'm learning to be is be who I am and accept who I am. And I'm accepting the fact that I am the president of the company. And I guess there was always some sense of unworthiness or shame, even wanting to be like everybody else, not wanting to be different. So that's been a real interesting awakening for me, is to learn to accept myself in the role that I have, and that I'm not going to be one of the guys because they're not comfortable with that. And in fact, in a hierarchy, that's really not appropriate. But I can be who I am. I can reveal my feelings, my fears, my beliefs, my dreams, and still be the leader that my position requires me to be.
Once a group gets into community, it does not always stay in community. It will fall out of it. What characterizes a group that is functioning in a true community mode is not that it is always in this wonderful state, joyful state that we call community, but rather that it will be constantly looking at itself. And so what will happen in a group that is functioning well as a community is not that it will always be in community, but that it'll lose it, but the quickness with which the members will say, hey, we've lost it, guys, we've lost it, guys. What do we have to do now to empty ourselves of? What do we have to empty ourselves of to get back and functioning well?
6 months later, we've put about a little over a third of the company has gone through community building. And there's no question that the withholding, the distrust has diminished greatly among the people that have been through especially. We've got a long way to go as a company, and I think it is a day-to-day continuous effort, because whenever there are problems arise, that's really where the rubber meets the road as far as, are we willing to empty ourselves of our ego, empty of ourselves of whatever? Are we willing to address this problem, this conflict, in a manner that we are used to, that we've always done, or are we going to try to do it in a community? And yesterday, I came out of a community building session that was just absolutely wonderful with about 26 other people, And then I came back to work, and there's two departments fighting one another. That's been simmering and brewing, and it had broken down into a total lack of communication, and all the communication that was happening was through rumors and asides and presumptions, and just like the good old days. And I had to take a deep breath and, okay, let's talk about how we want to address this. And I didn't make a decision for them, which is what they wanted me to do. And I just talked about the principles of community and sort of reminded them, and said, would y'all like to go try this again? And I think, we have to remind each other every day, especially when there's conflict. It's easy to be in community when there's no problems, when we're in the circle and everything's beautiful, but come back to the day-to-day realities of egos and pay and hours worked and so forth and so on, and power and authority. We have to remind each other.
Incivility comes naturally to us human beings, whereas we have to learn how to be civil. And by civil, I don't mean mere superficial politeness, but to be honest and really deal with the issues rather than trying to gloss them over. And so community as a way of life is not an easier way of life than being in pseudo-community or having no community, but it is more alive. More is happening. You're learning more, you're growing more, but it isn't easier. As a matter of fact, it takes more work rather than less.